Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks, and today we are here with a recap of UFC 300. Last week, we had our preview. We had the fights on Saturday. The fights managed to live up to expectations, and now we are here breaking them down, the fights themselves, and what we would like to see next from some of these fighters, and that gives us a lot to talk about. But first, what were you guys' impressions of UFC 300 as a whole? Obviously, it was a great card, but how do you feel about this card in hindsight, knowing that it was supposed to be one of the best fight cards of all time, and that was the product we got? How do you feel about that? Jerry, we can throw it over to you first.
I mean, it started out with two great fights. Davis and Figueiredo, Cody Garbrandt getting the submission there, so he got the crowd off going quickly. And then an absolute war between Bobby Green and Jim Miller. Night went even better than I think any of us could have expected. It was a great night of fights from first bell to last one. Can't believe it's over, but it also happened so quickly, and it was a hell of a time.
Yeah, I'd agree. It was great. I think it lived up to expectations. Even past them. I think what what really helps was it was great matchmaking and the fact that there was so many fights. Like a couple of them were pick'ems, a couple of them were virtually pick'ems, like minus 120 or something. So since the matchups were so good, you felt like you could see avenues for both guys specifically, and then every fight on top of that delivered, and we had a good mix of submissions, knockouts, and good wars. So overall, it was just it was all the UFC could ask for.
hmm Yeah, I feel like it lived up to expectations as well. And even the fights that maybe you had like a bigger underdog and it wasn't so close to the line, those were still like really good fights. Like Moicano won as like a fairly big underdog. He was one of the bigger underdogs on the card. Yan Xiaonan was the underdog in the co-main, and she technically lost pretty widely on the scorecards, but like there were moments in that fight that made you really believe she had a chance. Charles was one of the bigger underdogs, great fight. Cody, one of the bigger underdogs, and with Cody, it's like if anyone has a puncher's chance in the world at bantamweight, it's Cody Garbrandt. So even the bigger underdogs were there's compelling things about those fights. So yeah, great matchmaking. It felt like a massive card. A lot of people on the internet talking about it. It felt like UFC branched out to some new audiences this weekend, and I always love that. I always want to see MMA grow. That's one of the things that I don't want to say I hold above everything else because that's not necessarily true. But when MMA is growing, I think that's good for the sport in general, and I think we saw that last night. So I'm happy about that as well. And then getting into these fights themselves, main event: Jamahal Hill versus Alex Pereira. We I don't want to say we didn't see much action, but very very quick fight. First round finish for Alex Pereira. He shoves off, or not shove off, but he gives Herb Dean the no, don't step in. I got this. Lands a beautiful check hook on the inside while Jamal's throwing a straight. Gets himself a knockout in the first round. What did you guys make of Pereira's performance? Anthony, we can throw it over to you this time.
I loved it. Huge Pereira fan, and that man is just such a specialist. I don't know. His power is next level. Um, I was concerned about some things that I thought Jamal Hill could do to him. Maybe give a different look than that he's seen, but I keep picking him. I don't know. It seems like he has the death touch, in his left hand, and it always seems to land. And I thought, seeing that replay, it didn't even land that cleanly. It was like it looked like a couple knuckles, like almost like on the mouth instead of rather than the chin, and still, puts him down, gets to finish. And then I kind of, I know some of my friends are like, I loved the celebration after. But so that was just me. And then I loved the little celebration finish to top it off.
Yeah, I'm with you. That was for what we saw. It was a very impressive performance by Alex. I thought Jamal was going to go at him a little more. I thought it was going to be just full on, kind of like the end of that figure or not figurator, the Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje fight where they're just standing in front of each other swinging off. But it wasn't. Alex Pereira shows why he's one of the most dangerous people in the UFC. I know there was talks of him wanting to do heavyweight and anything. I don't think that's smart, first of all, but if anyone could do it and go up to another division, just because he does have all that power, I know heavyweight power is different, maybe he can. I thought he would have a little bit of trouble at first moving up to light heavyweight and having his power transition, but it's done that very easily. And I'm not sure. Maybe it's going to be a wrestler. Maybe it'll be someone like Ankalaev who can beat him, but I don't see anyone outstriking this guy in any of those two divisions he's fought in.
Yeah. And I think the other thing here is that was like the first clean punch that landed to the head. I believe he threw some shots to the body, but that was like the first shot that landed to the head. And it wasn't like Anthony said, it was, he just kind of grazed him. It wasn't like he landed, this clean, massive hook. It's like it was like a short shovel hook, quick shot, tight, and it landed hard when it landed. And that was like I did the UFC 300 5 things we learned, and I talked about his power in that article. And like I don't know if he's the hardest hitter that we've seen in the sport, but if he's not, at a minimum, he's on a very, very short list of guys in terms of pure power, because not only, does he have that knockout power, but like when you can do it in one punch, and we've seen it in other fights where, like even the Jiri fight, like very close and tight, and he lands that hook, and that is just the ability to do that and land that drop is really, really ridiculous. And the other thing is, I felt like they were kind of feeling each other out, trying to get the range. And Alex got a hold of that range pretty quickly. It felt like Jamahal was trying to get into a rhythm a little bit, trying to get some range. And he was never able to do that. So credit to the guy who's able to go out there and get that range 10 times faster. That allows you to land that shot in the first round as well. So last thing I'll add is that somehow I felt like Jamahal was dealing with the low kicks pretty well. I was surprised. I was like, these low kicks, he's not really chewing up that lead leg. He's landing some, but he's doing a good job checking some of those. So for Pereira to have that best weapon, when your best weapon, which is the calf kick, or maybe not the best, but the one you throw the most, is you're not landing it all night long at will, and then still being able to find the shot. It's like there's just a lot of things that are impressive that not a lot of guys could do.
I've wondered. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, since you brought up the leg kicks, I wonder if that's what kind of let Jamahal get caught like that, as he was so worried about Alex's throwing the leg kicks that he got him going. And I know I think I saw one or two feint leg kicks. And just after that, maybe it's you see him doing something with his hands, and then he just threw that left and caught him. It's one of those things that maybe it was kind of his secondary distraction plan.
Mm-hmm. And he can like feint the leg kicks and throw in the leg kicks. Like you can use that to back Jamahal up as well. I think Jamahal is much better defensively when he's in the open because he likes to step back and throw step back counters. So when you put his back to the fence, that kind of goes away. So that's another thing that can help a lot in that situation. So great performance by Pereira. And Jerry, you talked about it as well a little bit with what's next, which it's a very interesting discussion because I think there are some people that are really, really interested in a move to heavyweight or return to UFC 301, the next pay-per-view card. I'm not sure that he fights at 301. It sounds like he's got a broken toe, so it doesn't really seem like that's feasible. But he said, hey, I will. But I don't think, like, technically that he'll be able to just because of that injury. But do you guys have any interest in a move to heavyweight? And if you do have interest in that move, what's a name you would like to see? If not, you don't have to throw a name out there if you're not interested in the move at all. Anthony, we can throw it over to you first on this one.
I was trying to look. I think, I'm interested. He can do whatever he wants. I'll be there. Three-time champion. Also, he's just really just speed running this whole UFC thing. And to be fair, I wanted to say they are cherry picking non-wrestlers for him, which has been extremely helpful. He's gotten, I don't want to say he's gotten ideal matchups because they're not giving him like just, cans. They're giving him, he's fought 6 former champions or 5 former champions, but he has not had the tough task of fighting a predominant wrestler yet or something. They have been helping him at least in that. So if the move is heavyweight, you guys know I'm not the biggest fan of the heavyweight weight class, so I wouldn't mind watching Pereira, um, try his hand at that, see if he can become the first triple champion.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's what I would like to see. I think I'd rather see him stay at light heavyweight, try and run through the other contenders that are up there, and then make a move up. Because that's the thing with this division is since John Jones left it, it's been pure chaos. We've had two champions have to vacate the belt. We had a draw for one vacant title fight. Glover obviously fighting and then retiring and all that. So it's been an absolute chaotic division, and this might finally bring some stability to it and put an attractive name at the top that is someone that people want to tune in for. The reason he's headlined to Madison Square Garden, reason he headlined UFC 300 is he can become that star if he isn't already. To the point you made, though, Anthony, about him being picked for strikers, if he was to move up to heavyweight, and I know it'd be a big power difference than what he sees now, but I don't think he can fight any of the top 5 or 6 guys. I think he would get beat pretty easily. So a guy like Tai Tuivasa, that he's going to just stand up in front of him and swing, I think something like that would be entertaining. I think Tuivasa would probably knock him out because he does have more power, I would assume. But that's the only name I can think of that'd be like, oh, this might be entertaining.
So off the bat of the Tai Tuivasa comment, that would be a hilarious fight, and both those guys are so powerful that I think it'd be, well, let's see who lands first. Like, that'd be a hilarious fight. But I want to add in as well on the point about only fighting strikers, and I think that's true. And I think his opponents were selectively picked to get him to Izzy. Since he got to Izzy, I don't think that has been true. However, he hasn't fought a striker, but he hasn't fought a grappler, but I don't think it's them picking and choosing. I think it's like those are the guys in the positions. Like fighting Jan made sense. Fighting Jiri made sense. Fighting Jamahal made sense. Then again, when he's climbing up the middleweight rankings and you give him Sean Strickland and then Sean Strickland to a title fight, that was a complete dodge of every grappler in the division. But since that point, like he hasn't fought a grappler, which I'd like to see. But it feels like it was just kind of the hand that was available at the time, and he was getting the fights that were on the table. With that being said, I would like to see him stay at light heavyweight as well. And I just think it'd be weird to throw him up to a massive opportunity at heavyweight. Considering, like, for example, after he won if you compare Alex Pereira to Aljamain Sterling, and I'm not saying Aljamain Sterling is like deserving of every single opportunity that Pereira got, but Sterling defended the belt 3 times, didn't get a rematch, move up to 145, got Kattar, bad stylistic matchup, wins, and he's not going to get a title shot. Meanwhile, Jan defended the 185 belt Pereira defended the 185 belt 0 times, moves up, gets Jan, and then gets thrown into a title fight. There's just 2 guys, former champions, moving up, and you can see how Pereira got treated better. And I think it'd be hard to, just throw him right in there again for a heavyweight fight, and especially if it's someone like Aspinall. I think he gets out grappled very badly. I'd rather see him fight at 205 and take on a grappler like Magomed. And I'm not the biggest Magomed fan, and I think he's fairly overrated, but I do think he has earned the shot at this point. Last thing I'll add, if we're going to do the 205 experiment, I want to see Ciryl Gane. I think that would be a good fight just because those are 2 heavyweights who Pereira moving up to heavyweight, but Gane is the best in terms of movement, very good kickboxer in his own right. That'd be a very technical fight. I think that would be the one that would probably interest me the most among the top guys. And maybe if they do that and you beat Gane, then you can get a big opportunity. But I'd like to see an attempt at defending that 205 belt first.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, that I think I don't love the big jumping weight classes in general that happens. I also don't think you should even get to try to go for double champ without defending your belt multiple times. But I was curious. So you think if he stays in light heavyweight, it would be is Magomed next, or would it be just a Jiri rematch after that win?
I think that's up to interpretation. I don't think it's slam dunk either way. I would pick Magomed and think it should be Magomed, but I I would be open to hearing discussions about Yuri, but I would lean Magomed.
Yeah, I'm currently working on a story that'll be out later today, hopefully, for who all these top guys from UFC 300 should be fighting next, and I'm leaning towards Magomed because it's something different, and like what we've been saying, finally get to see him against an actual grappler. So it's that thing, and I don't know if a Yuri fight goes much different than it did last time.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could. I think you could sell like a Pereira going up against the Russian grappler, awful stylistic matchup. I think that creates a level of intrigue that a rematch wouldn't necessarily create. But then again, Yuri versus Alex is a pretty entertaining fight, if they were to fight 100 times. But
Yeah.
I just think there's something interesting about the booking him against the worst stylistic matchup. And hey, you go out there and knock out Magomed, then I mean, credit to you because kickboxer versus Russian grappler, and you get that win. Credit to you.
Oh yeah. I do want to just put one more thing out there, just because we have talked about the heavyweight move up. Not that I think this will happen in a million years, but if Alex was to go up and spend time up there, work his way up, and eventually become a heavyweight champion, where do you think that puts him on the GOAT list, being a first 3 division champion?
I
It's
already
tough because
mentioned my friends. He's already making movement in my list already. Just everything he's done in so fast. He's touched 2 belts. I thought he defended in 85, which I know now. Because I was going to say, the other thing I always like saying is some people say you're not a real champion until you defend at least once. And that I think that's very true. But so I thought he's defended now in light heavyweight. And if you were to go win heavyweight, I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
I have no idea where I would place him in the GOAT rankings. I'm not great at GOAT rankings after maybe say the top 5. Then it gets a lot I can make cases for 8 guys to have the number 6 or 7 spot or however many spots you want to go. But I think he would have one of the most unique cases for where do we place him in the GOAT list if he were to accomplish something like that. And I think he still does at this point in his career because he's had one of the most unique careers. I would compare him to Khabib in a way, not saying he's as dominant as Khabib, but I think Khabib's claim to GOAT status or how you rank Khabib pound for pound is unique and different than everyone else because of he got to the title, defended it 3 times, retired early. And I think Alex would be similar in kind of a shorter run. Like, how do you rank that run in comparison to someone who was in the UFC for 10 years defending titles and doing different things? So I think he would be up there with one of the most unique resumes and one of the harder guys to rank in a pound for pound all-time list.
Yeah, I'm kind of. It's one of those things that I just don't know where I would put him. It's got to take in a lot of other factors, but getting up there.
Last 2 things, as you say, one for that point. I also count entertainment or just how the experience of watching you fight was that which I know is it's very subjective, but it's not on everybody's criteria of ranking their goats. But I do think that's something is just like the eye test and the feeling that you get from watching your favorite player or your favorite fighter. And then second, my name. For the heavyweight, if you were to move up, I was gonna say Sergey Pavlovich because I know he's the big scary striker before he finally got knocked out by Tom Aspinall, but that'd be one that I'd be interested.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, even if heavyweight isn't necessarily the right move or the move you should make, but I mean, Alex Pereira is much watched TV no matter who you put him against, and all of a sudden, if you put him against a heavyweight, it's like, oh, I gotta make sure I got my eyes on this one. Like, there's just something about him fighting that you kind of alluded to there, where there's nothing like watching Alex Pereira fight. It's kind of a unique experience, and you can book him against anybody at heavyweight, and I'm gonna go, all right, I need to see that one. So I think that is always something that for Alex is going to be in his advantage when he's booking fights against literally anyone. All right. Any more thoughts on the main event before we move down to the co-main? All right. Co-main event, we saw Weili Zhang get a pretty wide victory over Xiaonan in terms of just the actual scorecards. But this was a closer fight, I believe, than the scorecards suggested. We had Jan drop Weili a couple times, but Weili used her grappling to kind of pull ahead early and late in the fight. The middle portion of that fight was a little sketchy for Weili, but she was dominant at the beginning and at the end of that one. What did you guys make of that performance and that fight as a whole? Jerry, I believe it is your turn to start us off.
I mean, I think this might be the first time I've seen a fighter submit, knockout, and still win by a decision of the same fighter in the whole time. Because the end of that first round, it looked like Jan was out cold. She did not know where she was. No idea how she survived, but sure enough did. And I want to say it was the second round. It might have been second where she got rocked again and looked almost out as well. Somehow kept going. And the fact that she kept going and even had some shots and I think some knockdowns of Zhang Weili was an impressive fight. And this is the fight I kind of expected. I thought Weili would dominate it. I thought it would be bits and pieces of Jan having moments, but ultimately, I think the better fighter won. And I think there's a reason we said last week she might be the best fighter on the women's roster. Just still wish this fight had been in China. Could you imagine the scenes of a Beijing crowd sold out watching two of their hometown fighters go at it?
I agree. I think that that would have been amazing. Well, but that's what the UFC should have done too. Yeah. First off, but they kind of fumbled the ball on that one. But
just to add on that quick, I know they're having problems going to China for whatever reason, because they were supposed to do Yan versus Long Yidong in China last December, and they had to pull that from China. So I'm not sure why, but they're having problems going to China. Just wanted to add that in there while we're on the China location thing.
And then, I was with you on, like I said, I had under 2.5 in that fight. So I watched her get choked unconscious in the first round. And then it was the second round. She probably had 15 unanswered strikes like at her head. And Jason Herzog didn't feel the need to call it. But then again, I guess he was right because she did get up and had a still pretty good fight after that. Like you said earlier, I believe the cards was at 49-45.
Yes. Yeah.
That was one of the more competitive 49-45s I've ever seen. So overall, I think it was going to be tough to beat Zhang. So I think overall both fighters ended up winning at the end because I think Jan hopefully has a lot more eyes on her and respect because she did put up a really tough, good performance, but. Yeah, I agree. The better fighter won. I think Zhang also showed we were worried about the grappling, and that's kind of where she was winning predominantly. Thought the striking could have been a little crisper. She did get in trouble a couple times, but overall, another good defense.
Mm-hmm. So with the co-main event, I want to start with the end of the first round, and you guys have talked about it a little bit, but I think it's insane that Herzog didn't stop that fight. When the bell rings, Yan Jianan is out cold. Yeah. And she does not move until Weili pushes her off of her. So that's what woke Yan up, was Weili actually pushing her off of, because she was completely unconscious before that. And then she's not getting up. She's out of it. And Herzog kind of helps her up a little bit. I think it's crazy that fight wasn't stopped. I mean, she was out cold. And if you're out cold at the end of the round, it's supposed to be stopped. And we have examples in MMA of that. We have Merab Dvalishvili versus Ricky Simone. Merab is out at the end of round 3, and that fight is called because he's out cold when the final bell rings. When that fight was ruled a sub for Simone, so we have precedence for that being a submission victory. So I think it is kind of crazy that fight was not stopped at the end of the first round. Now, with that being said, I also think it's absolutely insane that somehow when round 2 started, Jan looked fine. I don't know how we get from unconscious getting someone like, for example, if you go watch Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje, Charles has to push Justin Gaethje's unconscious body off him. Like Weili did the same thing to Jan, and then round 2, oh, she's right back to it. So I mean, credit to Jan for being. Apparently, she's one of the toughest fighters on the roster. Did not know that. Now I know that. But like you guys alluded to, it ended up becoming a grappling kind of masterclass for Weili. And not to say she was perfect on the ground, but she was landing her takedowns. She was dominant. And in the third round, which was the round that Jan won, I think it was like very clear that Weili's arms were just completely gassed from almost choking her out once and almost choking her out again in the second round. So one of the crazier things I've ever seen, one of the stranger UFC fights I've ever seen. Weili, like even in the later rounds, Jan looked good on the feet until Weili was landing the takedown. So, I mean, that fight's kind of feels very weird, but the fact that the fact that Weili found a way to win that fight, I give her credit for, because a lot of fighters in that scenario, I feel like, tired arms in round 3, should have had the finish in round 1 and 2. Your arms are dead in round 3. You find a way to go out there and win and still win dominantly on the scorecards. I don't think there's a lot of fighters that would have been able to do it like she did.
Agreed. I think that's why. My opinion, should rise to number 1 in the pound for pound rankings for the women's side of things, jumping over Alexa Grasso. But we'll see. Those rankings are weird at times.
Yeah. I will say I am concerned about the striking a little bit for Weili more than I've ever been. She got hit a lot more in that fight than I expected her to, and she reacted a lot more. Like when she got hit clean, it was kind of visible that she got hit clean. When you go look at other fights, like she went to war with Xiaonan and she didn't react like that when getting hit. So I'm kind of concerned about that. But hey, if you can out grapple everyone in the division, I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I wonder if that is to the point a bit of what you said earlier is she was gassed, it seemed, after those first couple rounds, at least arm-wise. She still outlanded Jan in that third round, but it was one of those things that her strikes weren't nearly as clean and weren't as precise as the other fighter.
Yeah, and do either you guys have any opinion on who Weili should fight next? Because I look at this division, and we have Yan Xiaonan, just beat her. Tatiana Suarez, Tatiana is injured. Maybe whenever Tatiana's ready, I'd be fine with Tatiana getting the shot, but we don't know when she's going to be healthy, so it's tough to say. Then you have Lemos, just beat her. Andrade, she won the belt against Andrade. That was a while ago. Andrade picked up a victory. Then you're getting to Verna Jandiroba, Marina Rodriguez, Mackenzie Dern, Amanda Hebas, not getting title shots. I have no idea who Weili should fight next, and I don't think there's necessarily a good option.
Yeah, I actually don't see someone to fight.
It's almost kind of crazy. Like we talked about flyweight like a couple weeks ago, like who the hell is going to fight for the flyweight title? But I think this is even worse in terms of who the hell. Like, if Tatiana Suarez is healthy, go ahead and book that fight. She beat Andrade, that's fine. But if Tatiana Suarez can't fight, I have literally no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I was just on paper, I was leaning Amanda Lemos, but I completely forgot that she just lost in the title fight against Weili. So here's another shout. And I know we've talked about how we hate jumping up and everything, but since there is no other viable option, does she potentially get? And I know it's hard because then it would put Firo out, or Macy Barber, Aaron Blanchfield, all those ones. But could she potentially move up and fight the winner of Grasso and Shevchenko? Otherwise, I'm thinking you wait for the winner of, in my opinion, either Jan fights Jessica Andrade and you fight the winner of that. Already fought them both though. So
yeah, I would say no to 125, not because Weili is undeserving per se, because she kind of cleared out the division, but I just don't think 125 is in a position to take on a challenger from outside when we know the champ and Shevchenko are going to fight in what's that, August or September? September at the Sphere, and then you're looking at Fior and the first quarter of 2025, it's like I just don't see I think that division has too big of a line to move up. So
I agree
I'm
with you
kind of
there.
clueless.
It's something I'm throwing out otherwise because there is no right option. Shit, maybe we see something crazy and we're getting a 10th ranked flyweight fighting for the belt. Maybe we see something crazy here.
Yeah, but the problem with that is 10th ranked flyweight and the 10th ranked women's strawweight,
It's a
two
big
very
difference.
different things.
I agree.
Like Lupi Godinez is the 10th ranked. If they were to do something out of left field, it'd probably be Jandiroba but I'm not interested in a Jandiroba fight in the slightest. So, I mean,
and that's the issue
whatever. I guess.
with this. So, who knows?
Go ahead. Were you gonna say something there?
I was gonna say, or she just fights some rematch against somebody, but I don't know.
Point being, Weili, you're screwed. Not actually, but you're in a bad spot. Let's move on to much more compelling fight, and the matchmaking portion afterwards should be also much more compelling. BMF bout, Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje. Max Holloway walks away with $600,000. Fight of the night, knockout of the night. He's up basically 4-1 with 10 seconds left in the fight. And the one part that's being forgotten here, Justin Gaethje threw a rolling thunder kick with 15 seconds left to try and get a walk-off KO. So Justin Gaethje was game as well. After the rolling thunder, Max Holloway points to the octagon, says, "Let's throw down in the middle." He lands that overhand right hand, puts Justin Gaethje out bad, like we've never seen Gaethje out before. Probably one of the greatest knockouts of all time. I'll just be conservative and say top 10 probably all time. Once you get to the upper portions, you're kind of splitting hairs when talking about sensational knockouts. Great performance, sensational knockout. The BMF fight, what are you guys' biggest takeaways? Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off.
That fight was, I don't know, that was amazing. I think it's a top 10 knockout for me. That was, and I'll be nice and say top 5 moment of all time of watching live. It was truly like when that knockout landed, when that punch landed, it was insane. Because you see so many fighters sometimes point to the octagon and you expect, okay, you get a little bit of fireworks within the last 10 seconds, but nothing's really going to happen. There's no way Justin Gaethje really gets put to sleep right now. And yeah, I think just the whole recipe of everything, it's the BMF fight, being up. It's been a war up to this point. 10 seconds left, even though he knows he's winning, and then to finish it really with a buzzer beater. It just made for one of the best moments of all time, and I understand why it was so popular on social media, and I feel like transcended UFC media and went to, got as big as it did everywhere. It truly was a crazy moment. That honestly topped off a fantastic performance. So I was gonna ask one question though, and it was gonna be, did Justin Gaethje break his nose that first round?
Yeah.
How much do you think that affected the next 4? Would be one of my questions.
I think it definitely affected the next 4 rounds, but I think Holloway was winning that fight regardless. Mm-hmm. Round 1, in theory, in that fight, round 1 is supposed to be the most dominant Gaethje round. Just when you're looking at, he's got 100% of his power, and that's the round that Gaethje is supposed to have the most success. And Holloway won that round up until that point, anyways, and then he caps it off with the broken nose. And I mean, when you break someone's nose, you reap the benefits of it, and it definitely had a massive effect on the fight. But Max Holloway lands a shot that breaks the nose as well. So credit to Max for landing that shot, but I also think that fight was trending towards Holloway just based off the first round. But I think that really pushed it further in Holloway's direction when he did land the shot.
Yeah, I think it made it a little harder, obviously harder to breathe and all that. And that affects you. I've never really been in any competitive fighting at all, so I take it lightly from playing other sports. But you get smacked in the nose and you can't breathe well, your fatigue is going to hit more, and it's just going to be harder to keep going. But man, what a fight! I hit this knockout, and it goes to the point of what we were saying a little earlier. And Anthony, I think you just brought it up again, that people who don't follow UFC were talking about this knockout. You said Pat McAfee. I had people texting me, and I know these people don't really follow UFC all that closely, being like, "Holy shit, did you see that knockout?" It was something else, and I thought it went to a decision at first. I was half asleep. I was like, "I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he got that off in time. I'm not sure what they're going to call here." But then it was just electric, and to know that you're standing across from one of the most dangerous people in the division, let alone maybe the whole UFC, and being up 4 rounds and be like, screw it. I have nothing to lose. Let's throw. If I get caught, I get caught. That's what the BMF belt's all about. I know we've had talks on here, whether you like it, you hate it. It's for fights like these that I love it. And it really lives up to its name. Curious to see what happens next, but that's a whole nother conversation we'll have in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised how well Max kept going and how well his speed transitioned to the 155, because that was my big concern going in was, is he going to be heavy enough or bulk up enough and have the speed still? Because he was skinny last time he went up against Poirier and paid the price for it.
Yeah. So I have a couple of things on the top of my mind here. So my apologies if I go a little long. But as far as the finish goes, I do want to say just like I think moment is the best way to put it. It can however you want to make it as a knockout, but I think it's one of the best moments when you think about all the context involved. BMF belt, Justin Gaethje. You know, it's not like Justin Gaethje is just some bum. This is like if there's one person in that division you don't want to throw down and trade with without taking a step back, it's probably Justin Gaethje. The fact that he's up 4-1, the fact that he face plants some, like there's a lot of things. The fact that, you know, for a large portion of his career, Max Holloway is, you know, the narrative has been that he doesn't have knockout power. That when he goes to lightweight, he's at such a power disadvantage that he can't compete. So when you kind of add all this together, it makes it absolutely massive. And then if you compare it to like, it's hard to compare where does that knockout sit in comparison to, you know, Edson Barbosa's spinning wheel kick over Terry Edom. Like that's a sensational knockout as well, but the context is so different. Or Buckley spinning knockout over Kasanganai. Like those are just they're very different. So I think like that makes I like the term moment a lot more. So I was glad you said that, Anthony. I think that's a good way to put it, as one of the best moments that we've seen in the octagon. And then I was very impressed with Holloway. Like, to me, Holloway looked like $1 million in there in terms of like shot. Like one of the things that I said on the preview, and I don't want a victory lap because I had an awful card in terms of picking fights. And this fight was like the one that I did the best on. So I'm not trying to victory lap here because I said plenty of things that were incorrect. But one of the things that I liked was that Holloway, it feels like he has so many different tools. And I feel like that was very evident. He needed the uppercuts in this fight because Gaethje ducks down a little bit. He was landing the uppercut. He needed that spinning back kick because Justin Gaethje kind of ducks down and you can blast him to the body. Or if he ducks down further enough, you get him in the head and break his nose. So I feel like Holloway had the right tools, and then the footwork, angles, speed to not get hit that much by Justin Gaethje was incredible. And the fact that the picture of him after the fight, where there's no bruising, no swelling, just a little bit on one of the eyes, it's like you got through a 5-round fight with Justin Gaethje and weren't beat to hell. Like, credit to you for that, because that's just not how fights with Justin Gaethje go. So Max Holloway to me looked like $1 million, and as you guys said, this knockout transcended UFC, and I believe this put Max Holloway on like a different level of stardom. And it's weird because he's 32 and it feels like he just got his big break in terms of becoming a UFC star, but he's been a household name in the UFC, has title defenses, he's already an all-time great, and boom, he gets his big break to become a star post being a champion. It's a very, very unique thing, and I feel like he just got hit with that.
Real
Oh,
quick, I was gonna say, I wonder if it's like he's a star. He's every UFC fan's like favorite fighter, every your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. But now it feels like he's a superstar to the masses, and the people that are more casual with the UFC.
Hmm. I agree with
um,
that. And if you compare Max to someone like Izzy was more well known in terms of a wider market. More people knew who Israel Adesanya was. But if you ask like an average UFC fan, do you want to see Max fight or do you want to see Izzy fight? Like, I'm not saying Max wipes the board with that question, but it's a lot closer than it would be in comparison to the average viewer, the average casual fan. And I don't say casual fan as a disrespectful term, but like more people know who Max Holloway is now in comparison to when he was a champion and when he was fighting Volkanovski trying to get that belt back.
yeah, he's risen now to a different level of fame and stardom just because of one viral knockout. People love knockouts. Doesn't matter when it happens or how it happens. It's something you love to see, and that's what got me a little not annoyed, but I know the commentary was annoyed by it. And it's something like you hear the fans booing, and when it's on the ground and say the fight we're going to talk about next and the fight we just spoke about, fans were booing there. I'm like, hey, it's part of the game. It's called mixed martial arts for a reason. But anytime you see someone just go in there, stand up and brawl, it's great to see. And for Gaethje's side of things, this leaves him in a very weird position and something weird, different, because this is usually what we see him doing to opponents. Is him just swinging and knocking them out. We saw with Tony Ferguson. We've seen him send people, and there was a thing I want to say that when Gaethje knocks you out, your career goes downhill quickly. I wonder what effect this knockout of him is going to have because I don't remember a time seeing Justin Gaethje getting knocked like this. Seen him get submitted a couple times, but that's because he's not necessarily as good on the ground anymore. And I do just have one other question. Are you surprised, considering he does have the wrestling background, that maybe we didn't see him shoot for any takedowns or anything just to change it up? Or are you completely expecting this, it seems?
No, I'm not shocked at all. I think there's a piece of ego, and not even in a bad way, but I think Justin Gaethje said before the fight, like, if either of us shoot, we're a bitch. Like, he said something along those lines. And, like, I think he doesn't say that as, like, I'm going to sound cool and we're going to go out there and strike, but he's genuinely like, this is the BMF. This is what we get paid to do. So I'm not surprised. And I have two other things I want to say. In terms of, I forgot to mention this earlier, but in terms of the moment, if you need any like inclination on how big of a moment that is, go back and listen to the commentary. You can't hear John Anik on the mic. John Anik has a call where he's like, you have to really listen closely to hear John Anik be like, Max Holloway just face planted Justin Gaethje. But that place is so loud that you can't hear the people speaking in the commentary booth. That's how crazy that was, that it drowned out the mics. It was so loud in that place. That speaks to how big that moment was. Secondly, credit to Justin Gaethje for taking this fight. He did not need to take this fight. He could have got a title shot at lightweight. He put that on the line to give the fans the best fight possible for UFC 300, and he wanted to make this a special show and do it with another great fighter. And he practically lost his title shot, and who knows how his career goes after that knockout. So Justin Gaethje really put it on the lines for the fans, and I think he deserves a lot of respect for even being in there, and let alone fighting like that.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I wanted to say earlier too. Well, first though, I think Max said it too in his post. It takes two to tango. It's probably. I mean, I know you got to be a real gamer to. That was Gaethje's last chance of winning is maybe scoring that last second knockout, but I still think you've been getting worked a little bit the whole fight. You have a broken nose. You're depleted. I mean, it takes a real one to even step up, and then to step up at someone pointing at you like that too is probably also could be a tough mental block for some people. So I have no doubt Gaethje probably stepped up and thought, okay, he just gave me the win right here. I'm gonna do it. And I know he went out of shield. So, but I was gonna almost. It's funny because I was gonna victory lap for you almost, and saying that's why the fighting's so tough because I thought that fight could have gone either way. I thought it was going to be extremely close, but like we said, the body work, the ducking of the head, we gave so many or a lot of reasons of why we were leaning Max or why we thought he could win. Yet, while I thought it was going to be, a close fight, and I could see Max getting knocked out, sometimes with fighting, you sit there, like when the game plan works and all the tools come together perfectly. I'm sitting there in the beginning of the third round, like, why did I not think Max was just going to destroy him from the start? But it's just tough. You never know what the fighters are going to get going that night and what's really, really going to be working. Because a 50-50 fight, sometimes the way it unfolds turns into an 80-20 fight or a 90-10, and you're sitting there like that wasn't even in doubt. So
Mhm.
I just thought that was interesting too. Because I remember that thought midway through the fight, and I was like, why did I ever see this any different?
No, I love that point. As I put in a lot of effort to picking fights, and sometimes fights that are 50-50 on paper, like you said, turn far outside of 50-50. And in hindsight, the fight looks way different. But like you said, like there's a list of things Holloway needed to do to win that fight, and it went check, 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 check. He deserves every credit in the world for that. And like not everyone can do that. I've picked plenty of fights where I've thought this fighter needs to do this, 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 and this, and they will win. And then they go out there and do none of those things, not one. And you're going, what in the hell are you doing? And I think that is what separates Max Holloway from an average fighter. So credit to him for that.
I'll put this out there in terms of that aspect. Got to be props to his coaches as well for game planning and planning it out, doing the film study on Justin Gaethje, knowing what his trends are, and then Max going out and just executing a game plan to absolute perfection, like you were saying. Just every box he needed to do, he checked off. And I love the aspect. Like to me, I was worried about his power transitioning or lack of power being there. Proved me wrong on that aspect. Now he has 2 straight knockouts after not having knocked out anybody since 2018. This is a dangerous Max Holloway we're seeing, even more so than the one we've seen as the featherweight champion of the world. So, going to be curious to see what happens next. My only other point in terms of this fight and actually the stuff in the octagon, awesome to see. Why am I blanking on his name all of a sudden?
Mark Coleman.
Mark Coleman, seeing him walk in with his daughters, first of all, the crowd going crazy for him, and then seeing him put the belt on, that was an awesome moment as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And I could talk about, we could have a podcast about this fight in just this fight. And we talked very long about it on the preview. That's how great this fight is. One last thing that I will add here on the Max Holloway coaching side is his coaches do not have a big team. This is not Eric Nixick. This is not, Habib and his team. This is not ATT. This is not a big gym. This team does not get very much credit because they are a small team in Hawaii that doesn't have a ton of fighters. You won't see this team on next week's card. You won't see it on the card the week after that. You're not going to see this team for a long time. And I think the actual game plan and coaching gets forgotten about because we see them so infrequently. And maybe it's because they were, Volkanovski did so great in those fights where, maybe that went under the radar, his team, but, Volkanovski is a great team in his own camp as well. I do want to talk. We've talked a little bit about what's next for both of these guys, but what do you guys think is next for him? We'll start with Max Holloway, and then we'll go over to Justin Gaethje because I think that just Gaethje side of things is important as well. I think just Max Holloway has 1,000 different opportunities, so I just want to ask, what do you maybe want to see next for Max, and what do you think will happen? So give me if the ball was in your court, what would you do with Max? And what do you think the UFC is actually going to do? Jerry, I believe it is your turn to lead us off.
I think for the Max side of things, for me, I think it's one and the same. I think had he lost this fight, it would have been a little more interesting to see because I know there's talks of the UFC doing the Volkanovski rematch with Topuria. I think after this performance, I want him to go back down to featherweight, fight Ilia Topuria. I think that'll happen. Topuria seemed, at least on social media, interested in that sort of fight. Has not seemed interested in fighting anybody else recently, so that's a step in the right direction. if he is to stay at lightweight, which I'm not sure if he would or not, that's where it gets interesting because I don't know who exactly he would fight there. It's not. I don't think he'd fight a Charles Oliveira. He could, but I don't know if that's the one I would want to see. Maybe. I mean, but that's the thing is, you just beat the number 2 guy in the division. It's kind of tough. So
But
I
just
think
beat the guy who's fighting for the title too.
Yeah.
Like he's coming off. Gaethje was coming off win over Poirier. He's fighting for the title.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things. Maybe he would fight the loser of Islam versus Poirier, but I think that's why the Topuria fight makes the most sense, and that's the one I want.
I 100% agree. I think that it needs to be Ilia Topuria. I know that that division's fine, but there's just a little bit of like, does Volk get the rematch again and stuff? I think there it is. There's your answer right there. Give it to Max. I think that fight would be massive. I don't know who wouldn't want to watch that. I know Max is probably going to be underdogged again, so that's crazy.
Someone posted a hypothetical with Max plus 130.
Yeah, so I mean that'll be fun. And then I think for Max, just you just beat Gaethje. I said go down, go fight Topuria. Maybe stay in that division for depending on if you win or lose or whatever. But I think you should. And for the most part, Max is always a company guy, anyways. But you can always just be like, if you want to move up, be like, oh, wait a minute, remember I just beat number 2 last time I was there, so just swing it to where maybe one more fight, and then if you beat another, number 1, number 2, ideally that could be another title shot at lightweight, or a title shot at lightweight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think Ilia is the most likely opponent, and I think that is one of the best fights you can book in the sport. With that being said, I think there are 2 or 3 very real possibilities here that are booked for fun and maybe not for Max to get a belt because he does have the BMF belt. First one, if Conor beats Michael Chandler, I think that there's a very real chance they do Conor versus Holloway for the BMF belt. Especially if Conor looks good. If Conor knocks out, let's say hypothetically, Conor knocks out Chandler in the first round, and Max is coming off that knockout. I have no clue how many pay-per-views that gives you. If you got McGregor on fire again, and maybe they rush McGregor to a title fight if he beats Chandler, but I think they want McGregor to have that BMF belt. And I think that fight with Holloway does a lot of pay-per-views.
Just while you're on that fight, I want to ask: are they doing that at 170 or 155?
Yeah, 170.
It's a 170.
That would intrigue me as well, because then Conor would have to go back down, I'm assuming, or would?
Yeah, he'd have to give the 55 to Max, considering he was already coming up from 45.
Oh.
And then I don't think Islam is the most intriguing fight. I would much rather see him fight Ilia than Islam. But if Dustin Poirier, in some world, manages to beat Islam Makhachev, I think Dustin versus Max trilogy for the title, and maybe they even put the BMF belt on the line as well, considering that Poirier was an ex-BMF guy. If he beats Islam, his stock is through the roof. Now I think maybe that could be a massive fight as well for 155 pounds. And I think that is one that UFC fans, Max, Dustin, would probably all absolutely love. So I think those are 2. The possibility of fighting Conor and Dustin are both there for Max, and both very real, but it takes some ifs and buts. Last one that is much more of a dark horse is if Chandler beats Conor. Maybe they do Max and Chandler, but I think that is very unlikely, but I don't think it is impossible. So those were my thoughts for Max's next fight.
Well, and I agree.
That McGregor fight would be so much fun.
Yeah. I forgot technically that he has the BMF belt, so they can main event him at any moment for pay-per-view. So I agree with this. When I said he should definitely fight Topuria and just always wait on if he wants to go back up to lightweight. And that is because I don't know why he would want to fight Islam. I don't think that's a great matchup. But if Poirier, like you just said, did Gaethje, and then instantly, I still want that Poirier fight, but instantly I would definitely think about going up and fighting Poirier. But my overall statement or sentiment of Taporia. Like you said, I think it's one of the best fights you could book in the sport. I would agree with that. And anytime you can genuinely do that in its own division, with someone already being a champ too, I think it should happen.
I mean, you can put the BMF up for that one also, because if Topuria comes out and finishes Max Holloway in a similar way that he did Volkanovski, we have a legitimate problem for everybody on our hands. He is already looking like that guy, so a win over Max in any sort of emphatic way would be absurd.
Any featherweight in the world that can beat Max Holloway deserves a ton of respect. If you finish Max Holloway, you deserve even more. And if you knock Max Holloway out, you deserve endless. You deserve everything. Like I can't even tell you how insane that would be for a featherweight to knock out Max Holloway. It'd be one of the most ridiculous things that happen. And if anyone could do it, it's probably Taporia. So
Has he ever been? He hasn't been knocked down, so I assume he's never been knocked out. I think wasn't his only time being finished against Dustin Poirier? Wasn't that a submission?
He was subbed by Poirier. He was knocked down against Gaethje, but they didn't.
I was going to say, did they count it?
No.
Oh, okay. That's what I was just about to ask.
So Holloway has technically never been knocked down or knocked out, but the Gaethje one, Max was like, yeah, he knocked me down. And against Poirier, he got not knocked down, but he got pushed back up against the fence, and he fell up against the fence instead of on the ground. So two very close knockdowns, but never finished by strikes.
So yeah, even more crazy. And just one more, just complete out of left field, because they have their friendly rivalry in the past. The daddest man and the baddest man, DC Max Holloway. Let's get it done.
Oh, that's funny. Let's touch on Gaethje as well. Does anyone have a good plan or idea for Gaethje? Because I do not. I have literally no idea. So if anyone has an idea or thought on Gaethje, I'm all ears. I will say I do think it should begin with a few months on the couch, then a few months easing it back in. Long layoff for Gaethje. Yeah. I'll start with that.
You want it, Anthony, or you want me to go?
I'll give a quick one. I guess, like you said, long layoff. How about so long of a layoff that other fights happen in that division, and so we don't even really know yet?
That's probably a good call.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Because, I mean, immediately after this, and I know it's probably not the right fight, but an Arman Tsarukyan, but he also kind of deserves the next title shot now at this point. So it's one of those things that maybe if he wants to stay active and give it a few months, maybe a Gaethje fight after that. But besides that, you could maybe do a Michael Chandler rematch down the line if Chandler comes out and beats Conor. Maybe an Oliveira rematch, but that doesn't intrigue me all that much. So it's a weird position. Do you think we could see him move? Yeah, and that's the thing. Do you think we could see him move a division? Or I do have one other after that. So no division move?
I don't think so.
What about, and I know he just lost to Dustin Poirier, but he also had the staph infection. What about a guy like Benoit Saint Denis or one of these other up-and-coming guys? Maybe it'd be disrespectful to him, but a Renato Moicano kind of fight. Someone who's moving up in the rankings, but gives you something less dangerous maybe from the Gaethje side than what you've been going at, and sell a new face as well.
I think you could book some of those guys against each other and give them the winner. Like if you book BSD, Saint Denis, maybe Hooker versus someone. Hooker and Gaethje have never fought, and I think if Hooker can get a win here and kind of crack into that upper portion of the division, I think that'd be a really good fight. I think you book some guys like BSD versus Hooker, Moicano versus Dariush. Maybe not those exact matchups. I'm just kind of throwing names out. But book 2 or 3 lightweight fights. Let's see who wins, and hopefully we get another guy in the top 5. Boom, there's your fight for Gaethje in early 2025. So I think that would probably be the route that I'd go.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move it on here. That talked about that one for a while, but it's all right because that will go down in history. Next fight on the card, Arman Tsarukyan versus Charles Oliveira. We get 2 rounds to 1 for Arman on 2 judges' scorecards. One judge scored it for Oliveira. Very close fight. Very good fight. Very intriguing fight. It wasn't the banger. It didn't have the knockout, but I thought we had a good scrap here. What did you guys make of this fight? Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off.
It's tough. Basically, all I got from this fight was I wished it was 5 rounds. Essentially, I think both people look good. I think obviously I do believe I think the decision was right. Arman won. Um, I think there's a debate to be had here about even rounds and what it means to be because you think of it like almost finished. Who was closer finishing the fight? I think that first round with Charles locking in a submission for like a minute and 20 seconds, or or a minute, or however long it was, compared to I don't think he was once at risk of being finished, and in the first that is. Um, I assume that's the round they gave him, and then he locked in an armbar with 3 seconds left in the second that would have I think ended the fight, and then he had the submission to choke at the end, but only had it for like 10 seconds. So I wonder if that was another 40 seconds of maybe holding that, how that would go. But overall, I mean, while I don't, Charles in the past has had marvelous performances. I wouldn't say he had one of those, but I still think he looked good. And then I think Arman Tsarukyan looked good as well. Did everything he needed to do. Looked good on the ground over Oliveira, who's supposed to be dangerous from his back. Did good enough in the striking. Did really good in the last 2 rounds of the striking. I know Oliveira I felt like was getting him in the first round a little bit more, I think, but yeah, it was overall it was just a pretty close fight where I thought both people looked good. Arman just looked a little better through those 3 rounds, or in those 3 rounds.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the split decision was the right call in the end. I see ways that both could have come out ahead, and I really thought Oliveira was going to get that finish at the end there. It seemed like that choke was really tight. Even Arman said afterwards that it was very, very tight on there. But hey, didn't get it done. Arman Tsarukyan, owe him a lot more respect than I had. I definitely came into this thinking he was levels below in terms of it's the Islam, Dustin Poirier, Gaethje, Oliveira, then a big gap, and then Tsarukyan in those next set of challengers. Proved me wrong in a big way there, and he looked good against against a former champion and one of the best knockout artists we've seen in UFC history. So, all respect to him, and he has a very interesting situation now. But I was surprised that he didn't try any real submissions or anything, considering this was one that I was thinking of, or they were on the ground a lot of grappling exchanges, a lot of reversals here and there. Oliveira, the fact that he didn't get a takedown but had 4 submission attempts, kind of shows how good he is on his back and up against it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Arman looked pretty. I don't want to say sensational. He looked sensational in defensive grappling. The fact that he was not submitted in that guillotine, ridiculous. Charles Oliveira jumps Gilly, and when he jumps Gilly, I'm against jumping Gilly, but Charles Oliveira gets to jump Gilly because he's one of the best Gillies, and 2, when he doesn't get the Gilly, he ends up in mount. That's the number one thing that more fighters need to realize. Hey, maybe I don't get the Gilly, but when I don't get the Gilly, I'm now in full mount, one of the best positions in the sport. So that's a nudge, Dustin Poirier. Now, it's hilarious that Arman Tsarukyan shorts falling off may have saved them from being choked out cold. He wasn't tapping. And credit to I believe Henner Gracie, one of the Gracies, but Brian Ortega's jiu-jitsu coach made a video basically explaining why the guillotine didn't work in the first round and why the darts didn't work in the third round. And he said in the first round, hey, his shorts falling down may have been the reason that he didn't get like legit jiu-jitsu black belt. One of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world said his shorts falling down may have saved him that fight because then your legs go down. You don't have as good of a grip. You're not putting as much pressure on the neck. So Arman Tsarukyan losing his shorts may have actually saved him that fight, which is insane to think about. But it's still ridiculous that he didn't get subbed. It's ridiculous that Charles Oliveira is in full mount, and he landed a reversal to get in mount himself and end that round in mount. He still didn't win round 1, but saves you from taking damage that could have prevented you from winning round 2 or 3. If you get a cut over your eye, maybe you don't see a left hook coming in the second round, and maybe you get baptized. So credit to him there. He got on top. He limited Charles's offense from bottom. Charles wasn't getting sweeps. So Arman Tsarukyan, really, really good fight from him. Charles Oliveira, I still thought looked good, but he was just facing someone who's really good from top. So some of his stuff off bottom didn't work. And guys in top position in this division, Arman Tsarukyan is either probably number 2 or number 3 behind Islam in terms of working from top position. So all the credit in the world to both guys. And I don't think Oliveira should slip too far. And in terms of matchmaking, here's my ideas. I say we just give Arman the next title shot. You beat Charles Oliveira. Islam wants to fight one more time this year in the fall, whether it's Abu Dhabi, Madison Square Garden. Give that to Arman. He was offered the June 1st fight and declined it, understandably so. That's by the time you get over your medical, by the time you get your medicals cleared, you probably have a month to train. Like, that's not feasible against Islam. So
Alexander Volkanovski.
Yeah, he would have said yes. So give him the fight in the fall. And then for Charles, I think you do Gamrot. Another grappler, a similar test to Arman. And Gamrot's a guy who, I don't want to say he got screwed by the Dustin Poirier fight, but he was the backup. And then he was the backup, and then they give the fight to Volkanovski when he was the backup in Abu Dhabi. He still weighed in. He still made weight. Then he gets RDA, which isn't that big of a step up for him. So I don't think Gamrot has been given a ton of opportunities. He's had a couple of, wins he had the win by injury over Fiziev. I say we just figure out if Gamrot deserves to fight for a title and give him the Oliveira fight. So that's how I would matchmake the this matchup.
I'll say, looking at the Gamrot side of things, he also did beat Tsarukyan in 22. So he has a win over the guy that Oliveira just lost to. So I have no issue with that fight at all. And then, same thing with Tsarukyan. He just beat the number 1 guy who was going to get the next title shot before he missed weight, or before he pulled out with injury, not missed weight. So let him sit out until, I think, October, November time, whenever they want to do it, whether it's Abu Dhabi or MSG, and give it to the winner of Poirier and Islam.
Yeah, I like that Gamrot pick because I think that's. I mean, I don't know if it's tough because those fighters already all completed like the little round robin against each other. So I think Gamrot is the perfect next step, still a challenger, and then get past him. And I don't know. I really wanted to see Charles fight for the belt again against Islam. And since I think he was going to get the rematch, I agree. It's only right that Arman gets it. And I think Tsarukyan, I like I said, I liked him in general. I think he was really good. And after that fight, I'm fine with it. And just overall of this fight, I think it's crazy to have a genuine, like, close submission attempt in each round and still lose. It's insane. And I get that, like, looking back on it, especially if it's Charles, to not get the finish there is insane. I wish it was a 5-round fight. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I feel like old UFC, the reason we're stuck with so many bad, what do you call it, cards that are pay-per-view fight nights are, because that Oliveira Gamrot fight has fight night main event written all over it, because I think it, should probably be a 5-round fight anyways. But the UFC just doesn't do that anymore, and they'll put it on a lower tier fight on a pay-per-view event, and then we're going to have to deal with, that. But that's what I feel like the issue is we used to get those, not necessarily title or contender like eliminators though, but those solid, those solid like ranged ranked fighters, the 3-4 matchup, or like the 7-5, 7-2, all that stuff, where it used to be its own little main event, and now it's always just put as the 4th or 1st fight on a card.
Yeah, especially for more entertaining divisions. Another example, Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. Would have loved to see 2 more rounds of that one in a fight night main event. Oliveira, Tsarukyan, would have loved to see 2 more rounds of that in a fight night main event. The list goes on. Meanwhile, you're getting those 5-round fights at middleweight and at light heavyweight because they don't want to put those guys on pay-per-views. But you don't need 2 extra rounds of Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann, for example, if they were to fight. They might have actually headlined a card. But my point being, those middle-tier guys in lightweight, welterweight, Jeff Neal versus Shavkat. Imagine that that was finished in the 3rd round, but that could have been a 3-round fight. So I'm with you. I think that is a very good explanation of how we kind of got to this point with fight nights.
And I wonder if a lot of that, at least recently this calendar year, had it with the intention of UFC 300 is going to be all main events. UFC 299 had a lot of main events that they put at 3-rounders instead. So I'm wondering if we're going to fall back down to reality a little bit and start getting more of these higher end other ranked fights that are, instead of pay-per-views, make them a fight night main event. Because that's also how you get people into the sport. If you're able to, instead of paying pay-per-view or however you watch it, if you're able to just watch on ESPN Plus and watch Oliveira Tsarukyan, that would have been great. People would have watched that or tuned in for an Oliveira Gamrot. Because these guys are becoming more of household names, but it's hard to watch them when it's just pay-per-view and they only fight so often.
Yep, I'm with you guys on this. Moving on throughout the card, we don't have to go too deep on this fight once again. Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage. I think Bo Nickal still has some development to do. I think that would be safe to say. I would have liked to see a more dominant fight against Cody Brundage. I know the commentary was kind of, Cody Brundage, this is a step up in competition. No, it's not. Cody Brundage is 4-4 in the UFC with a DQ win and 3 pretty fluky wins. Cody Brundage was lucky to be in the UFC going into this fight. This is not really a UFC caliber fighter. Bo Nickal, did his job, but I think there was a little more resistance than I would have liked to see. I think Bo kind of alluded to that in his post-fight press conference. That said, this is a prospect with 6 fights. Not expecting him to be a world beater, but I do think there is some development, pretty substantial development left with Bo Nickal. So I don't want to say I hope he hopes. I don't want to say I hope he keeps getting Cody Brundages, but I'd like to see some guys who are not ranked, probably will never be ranked, but can at least hold the UFC roster spot. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this Cody Brundage Bo Nickal fight. What did you guys make of this one? Jerry, I believe it's your turn to lead us off.
I mean, I guess I was surprised that it got out of the first round. First of all, I thought this was going to be another quick finish. So props to Cody Brundage for staying in there, at least surviving a round with Bo Nickal, who did, like you said, didn't look as good as we've seen him. Definitely a little bit of a step up, nothing too massive. I'm surprised I'm curious to see, I guess, what they do next, considering it seems like if they're putting him on pay-per-view for UFC 300, they want him to start fighting ranked guys and kind of make a quick move up the decision. Whether that's the right way to do it or wrong way is an interesting one. And a guy who I want to see him fight potentially, 2 ones, Alex Fluffy Hernandez would be an interesting fight. And then Paul Craig. Paul Craig is kind of becoming that, we're going to give someone to him to test out his ground game and see what happens, because he used to be a very good jiu-jitsu fighter. Now he's getting a little older, but Bo Nickal didn't get hurt. I think Paul Craig doesn't have a fight booked, so maybe he's healthy. Do that on the main event or main card at pay-per-view in England. That would be kind of one for me that I'd look for.
I agree with the same thing, as in probably thought it was going to be a first round finish. Didn't look great. Still got the job done. Everything. I like those names. I did want him to fight a ranked guy, but I thought your names are good, and kind of like James just said, after that performance, maybe he's not quite ready for a ranked guy, but regardless, there does need to be a step up in competition, because I'm tired of watching him fight nobodies do normally great. This time just did good, I guess. And, we're still sitting like, well, how good is he?
Yeah, I kind of think I think he needs a win or two before we get to that level. I really like Fluffy Hernandez. I think he's really good. He's booked against the Elite right now for the next pay-per-view card, or maybe that's 302. 302. He's booked against the Elite.
I did see that, yeah.
And I just think it's kind of silly to say, hey, let's give Bo Nickal someone who is just a lot more developed. I don't want to say a more developed version of Bo Nickal, but Anthony Hernandez is a primary grappler who went through the stages of development that Bo Nickal needs to go through. Anthony Hernandez was not a college wrestling champion, much more of a jiu-jitsu base as well, but he has had the development in his game. So I think we should give Bo Nickal that time. I'd like to see like a Abdul Razak Al Hassan is fighting down at welterweight, but I'd like to see a name like that. Maybe an Edmund Shabazian, who, hey, Edmund Shabazian isn't a world beater, but, you know, some serious skills, can hold a spot in the UFC, not going to be a world champion, not going to be a ranked fighter. I'd like to see one of those before we get to the Fluffy Hernandez's of the world. So I'd like to see maybe an Edmund Shabazian, and then maybe we go Paul Craig, and then we start going into some ranked fights. I just think there should be another step before we start getting to that level. I think there's still some still some development to go, because I don't think we should rush this, is my overall point.
And that's what I'm slightly concerned about from the UFC standpoint is we've seen them rush prospects and try and get them into the rankings really quickly and fight guys that are a little out of their league. Alex Pereira worked out perfectly. I know Raul Rosas Jr., it seemed like they were rushing him a little bit, ended up getting beat. Didn't work out as well. They're still only 18 or 19, so plenty of time for him to be back at it. I don't want to rush Bo Nickal because I think we do have a potential superstar here. Maybe not a superstar, but a potential top-ranked middleweight guy in the future. There are some holes still. His stand-up game isn't that strong. He get taken advantage of by other guys very quickly the further up you move. His ground game is very good, but it's a different thing, collegiate wrestling, than it is in the UFC and in mixed martial arts. So it's something that there's a couple layers that still need to be worked on. I'm just worried that they might rush him a bit too quick. And with him being on the pay-per-view main event ahead of top-ranked guys, former champions, it's one of those things I'm like, we might see him get a ranked fight sooner, and I don't know if that's necessarily good for him at all.
Mm-hmm. Andre Petrovsky, another name that I would like that came to mind while you were talking. So, all right, let's move down to at least touch on these first two prelims, because I think these are both fairly important here. Prochazka versus Rakic. Outstanding fight. Sucks for them that they were on the same card as Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje, because they had 300K lined up. Did not get it, but that was a wild fight. Rakic was kicking the legs. He was doing the things he needed to. Then Jiri just said, you know what? We're going to go to war. They went to war. Jiri landed the knockout shots. Rakic landed a nice step-in elbow as well in that spot that kind of wobbled him. So I thought Rakic actually looked pretty good, and Jiri just did what Jiri does. So credit to him for that as well. What do you guys make of this featured prelim? Anthony, we can start it off with you.
I mean, I thought we actually teed this one up perfectly. We talked about Rakic and the leg kicks. Huge factor. Jiri was wearing it instantly. Halfway through the first round was already showing. Those leg kicks were a problem for him that he eventually will have to figure out how to deal with. But also then showed that it doesn't really matter if you're just an insane person who is also a samurai. Because like we said if Jiri can produce enough chaos, I'm sure he can get the finish, which he did. And we also, or at least brought up how Rakic doesn't have that many finishes. He, like I said, couldn't finish a gun shy, probably worst at that point. Santos had only finished Jimmy Manuwa and I think one other person. But it's funny, for as much as Jiri was wearing the leg kicks and his legs were just brutally hurt, he was eating everything Rakic threw like an absolute buffet, just totally not stunned by anything except maybe one or two strikes, but really just ate everything that was offered to him. And that's what let him power through. and get in Rakic's face, because every time Jiri had Rakic up against the fence, huge problem. Anytime Jiri landed on Rakic, way different reaction than when it was vice versa. So, yeah, overall good fight. I did think Rakic looked good as well. I just think he just kind of looked like he had pillows on his hands for a little bit to Jiri. And Jiri was able to just be an absolute menace, push through, get the finish, and get him out of there.
Yeah, I will say I agree with you on a lot of what you just said. Rakic going after the leg kicks. We saw Alex Pereira go after those leg kicks and then continue attacking up top. Aleksander Rakic didn't do that nearly as much as I would have liked to see in this kind of fight. First round, he landed 17 shots to the leg, 19 to the head. So it was very balanced there, but I would like to see him go after Alex a little more. He ended up doing, or go after Jiri a little more. Ended up doing so and got caught in the end. And this is why I was high on Jiri coming into this fight. You never know what can happen with him. He is a very dangerous striker, and it does take a couple of shots to put someone out, and he sure enough did that to Rakic. But it wasn't the most pretty fight for him. This is a fight, like you said, James. Had it not been for Max and Justin Gaethje, this would have very likely been fight of the night or one of the top two otherwise.
Yeah, and moving forward, I got one name that I really like for each guy. I want to see Jiri versus Jamahal. Assuming the time frame works out there, because Jamahal, Achilles injury comes back. I don't want to say too early, but fairly early, and then gets knocked out. So maybe he wants some time off to kind of take a couple more steps with the Achilles, and kind of shore up that knockout. But then again, maybe that lines up with a Jiri return. So I think Jiri versus Jamahal is as good of a fight as you can make in that division. And I'd like to see Rakic versus Khalil Roundtree. I think Rakic has kind of established himself as a top 5 guy. I think he's very good, and I think that performance showed off a lot of his skills. And I think Khalil Roundtree deserves a name in that top 5 that can give him a good fight. So I think I like Khalil Roundtree and Rakic for the next one there.
Do you want to just say just a quick shout for Rakic? He did come off that knee injury, and it didn't look like it was affecting him all that much. So,
yeah,
that's a fair shout.
I agree.
As far as fights go, love Jamahal Hill and Jiri. Neither of them really ever lost the belt when they were champions, but both were beat by Alex Pereira. Let them fight. Let's see what happens. Maybe the winner gets another shot at the next champion, whether it is Pereira or someone else. As far as Rakic goes, I wouldn't mind seeing like Khalil Roundtree fight. I'm curious what's happening with Jan Blachowicz, because he's kind of just sitting there at the moment, and he did suffer that injury against Jan. I don't remember exactly how the first part of that fight was going, but I wanted to say it was relatively even, so maybe running that one back is an option. Otherwise, I don't know if you can go against Johnny Walker at the moment, because he's been on a slide, I'm pretty sure, but also just fought Ankalaev. So one of those those 3 guys are the ones, depending, but.
Oh.
Yeah, and just to answer your question about Jan, he did just have shoulder surgery.
Oh, okay.
And he is old as well, so I'm kind of concerned. 41, shoulder surgery. I love Jan Blachowicz, but
damn.
We're getting a bad combo of age and injuries for him, and it's kind of unfortunate because he's probably going to go down as someone who's just been really underrated, but it is what it is.
It is indeed.
All right. Any more thoughts on the on this fight before we go down to Sterling Kattar? All right. Sterling and Kattar. This fight, Joe, you talked about it a little bit earlier, pretty much became a grapple fest really quickly. And credit to Aljamain Sterling, because moving up in weight, I thought he looked physically like a featherweight. That was my big question. It was, what does it look like when we're grappling with a bigger man in comparison to, the 135 guys who Jan, Cejudo, much smaller end of that division even. So he went from fighting guys on the smaller end of 135 to the bigger end of 145. And he looked good. I felt like Kattar was kind of, I don't think he was his best. The knee injury coming back from that. And I felt like he kind of got discouraged in the grappling. And I don't think he looked as good defensively grappling as he had in the past. That camp has had problems defensively grappling. Recently, see Rob Font versus Corey Sandhagen, where Rob Font got out grappled badly. This was not really to that extent, I would say. Pretty dominant, but I think Rob Font just kind of laid on his back, and I think Kattar had a little bit more pushback, but still dominant performance for Aljamain, so impressive for him. Kattar didn't look quite as good as he had in the past, but Sterling gets credit for kind of getting him to the point where he was discouraged in the grappling. What do you guys make of this matchup? Jerry, we can throw it to you.
I mean, pretty much he summed it up. It was very much he took him to the ground and kind of held him there. Aljo, I will say, looked better on the feet than I thought he would against Calvin, but it didn't last very long up there at all. Ended with almost as many total strikes in the first round that Calvin Kattar had in the entire fight. And that's something that we're not used to seeing with a Calvin Kattar fight. We're used to seeing him striking and being the aggressor. So kind of surprising, but I think this fight in the short of it shows that Aljamain Sterling belongs in this division now. So good win to set him on the right path.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was a close fight for me because of all the questions, and I had the main question was I didn't know if Aljamain Sterling's wrestling would look that dominant up a weight division, and clearly it still does, at least against someone like Kattar. I think what it shows too is just Aljamain Sterling is just such a great fighter that I think is consistently hated on and or underrated in a sense. I've always liked his striking. I don't think he's like a great striker by any means, but I always think it's one of the things is, and he said this in an interview, his wrestling's so good, therefore his striking is always looked at like worse than it actually is. But overall, I think it was a great win for him. It looks like he has another division where he can be title competitive. And Kattar, yeah, well, I don't think he definitely wasn't his best performance either. But I'm interested at least in both of their next fights.
Mm-hmm. As far as the striking is concerned, I'm more concerned for Aljo in the defensive than the offense. I think the offense looked fine, but when he gets offensive, he puts himself in terrible positions, and Kattar didn't really throw much in this fight offensively. So that kind of, when that's going on, you kind of get away with it. There were some times where I was like he's throwing 2 shots to the body, and he's kind of leaning over, and his head's out there, and I'm like, oh no, here it comes. Kattar just didn't throw in those spots. So I'm interested to see what that looks like against different fighters in this division. I think there are several fights you can do at 145. I think you have Ortega, Evloev, and Sterling. Put 2 of them against each other. I also don't hate the idea of Aljamain versus Arnold Allen. I think I throw out Arnold Allen every single fight week, and I'm like, I'd like to see this guy fight Arnold Allen. But I think that's more so because I like seeing Arnold Allen fight. In hindsight, Arnold Allen versus Max Holloway. Hey, Arnold Allen lost that fight, but in hindsight, it doesn't look as bad as it did a year ago. So I think then again, you can't do Arnold versus EI if you book that. So I don't really have highly strong opinions on the matchmaking at 145, but I do think Sterling, Evloev, Ortega, book 2 of them against each other, and then the third one, regardless of who it is, I'm sorry, you kind of get screwed over. That's just mathematically, we've got 3 and not an even number.
Yeah. You want to go, Anthony?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, James, in terms of the Aljamain Sterling side of things. One of those guys, I would like an Arnold Allen fight just because it would be entertaining, but also at the same time, I like Arnold Allen, so I don't want to see him lose to Aljamain Sterling and then his whole lose 3 straight. You're kind of in trouble, and it's hard to come back from even at his age. So something like that. But if Arnold Allen gets the win, moves him further up, and he's like, oh, just finished a former champion. As far as Calvin Kattar goes, I'm not sure who he's fought below him, but a guy like maybe a Dan Ige fight, a Bryce Mitchell, something like that. But we just saw him go against a grappler, and that wasn't fun. Give me a striker of some sorts. I don't care who it is, really. Something to give him some entertainment and go in his realm because he looked bad on the ground. Or didn't look bad, but he looked dominated, I'll say.
Two quick thoughts here before we get off this one. Poor Aljamain Sterling will probably be booked against Josh Emmett, a decent wrestler that could absolutely baptize him, knowing how much the UFC likes Aljamain. I can see that fight popping up and being a fight booking, as unfortunate it is for Aljamain. I think that's just kind of where he's at in terms of public perception, and it's a shame he doesn't deserve that, but it's besides the point. For Kattar, give me the winner of Edson Barbosa and Lerone Murphy. They've got a fight night card coming up. Those two, they're headlining a fight night in the next month or 2 months. I think Kattar versus the winner of that makes a good amount of sense. All right. Let's hit some quick final thoughts on this card, and we will call it a day. We're going long, but it's UFC 300. I can lead us off here. That guy, Jalen Turner is so good, but man, he just finds a way to lose fights. We talked about it a little bit briefly last week on the preview, but there's just something about Jalen Turner. He loses fights that you think he's going to win or you think he should win, but man, he looks so good when he looks good, and just struggles to find results. And that's my final thought. Jalen Turner, come on, man. We need you at the top of that lightweight division because he has some violent matchups awaiting, but he just cannot get over the hump to get there.
Yeah, I'll go real quick. I agree. He can't seem to get on his own way. My one quick thing on that is I thought since $300,000 was on the line, he tried to do a walk-off to like make it look cooler and maybe win the money. Was just maybe my thought or reason for that. But
And
still insane.
The last time he grounded and pounded someone, he almost killed them in his last fight against Bobby Green. So maybe he's like, I'll just walk away and we call it.
Yeah, where the ref didn't stop it. Yeah. That was I guess my quick thought I'll just very quick thought, Kayla Harrison, awesome. It's so fun to have fresh blood in the women divisions, but also like someone that is just looks that dominant or looks that great, already has pretty storied career for fighting. Finally, UFC debut, does that, awesome. And then I guess the last one I'll say is Diego Lopez, looking like the real deal. That was, I think, Sadiq Youssef, so much respect. I think he's a great fighter. And Lopez, it was a big test for him, I felt. And, passed with flying colors. Even actually probably exceeded expectations with how fast he got the finish.
Mm-hmm. Youssef, another very talented guy that just, I don't know if he can't get out of his own way, but there's some chin and there's some cardio and just can't get over the hump. But, man, he has talent, and he's losing fights. Unfortunately, for his talent level, he loses fights that I think he can win. Jerry, what are your final thoughts?
The Diego Lopez one was going to be one of mine. Is like he's coming. There's not much you can do about him. Give you maybe, I don't know who Bryce Mitchell has next, but something like that. Because that would be a good fight in my opinion.
I think Bryce Mitchell has 8 more months of not getting hit in the head.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. He's still. That's a good point. I completely forgot about that. Kayla Harrison, maybe she can save this division because God knows we need it. Laura Amanda out of retirement, fingers crossed, gives us something. But I'll go with my last one just because it's not one we've talked much on. Bobby Green and Jim Miller. What a performance by Bobby Green. He looked so good in that fight. It was against Jim Miller. I thought Jim was going to go at him a little more, but this is the difference between a guy who's been fighting. Sure, he might be losing these at times, but he's been fighting guys like Islam, Dober. He's been fighting dogs, where Jim Miller's been fighting guys who he can get finishes against a bit in a way. So that was an impressive fight, impressive performance by Bobby Green. And curious to see what happens next because he is getting up there in age.
Bobby or Jim?
Oh, both, but Bobby.
Both.
He called out Patty for the Manchester card, and I think that fight probably gets made.
Bobby, that was Bobby, right? Or was that Moicano?
Moicano probably called him. Moicano's called him out in the past. Wouldn't be surprised if he called him out. But Bobby called him out in his Octagon interview afterwards.
So that's the one I was thinking of. Yeah, give me that fight then.
Yeah, and Patty's got a better chance of beating Bobby than Moicano. So,
agreed.
One last one I'll throw out there. Deiveson Figueiredo, nice win over Cody Garbrandt. Give him respect for opening up that card. Good submission win. He's got a lot of fun potential matchups up there at 135 as he now is probably moving up. Piotr Jan, I heard he needs a fight. Book that one.
Oh, I did it last week. I'll do it again this week. Only fight we haven't touched on at all. Jessica Andrade, Marina Rodriguez.
It is the same fight too.
It is the exact same one. There's maybe a reason behind that, but Andrade looked decent. Looked like some power in her, but it was there. Just had to say
it was actually a decent fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. But.
Yeah, I thought it was a good fight as well. It really got swept under the rug by all the other names and crazy fights, and that actually ended up being a pretty good fight. And if that fight was a co-main on a fight night, we'd be talking a lot differently about it. It's just unfortunately shoved in a prelims of a sensational card. So
kind of like the whole card, but everything delivered though. So
yep, everything delivered. I think is the biggest takeaway from UFC 300. They found a way for it to live up to the hype, and the hype was massive. It lived up to the hype. Proudly have some new UFC fans. Can't really ask for much more for UFC 300. And thank you to everyone for sticking it out. Hour and a half on the preview and the recap. Way longer than we usually do, but we only do it because it's UFC 300, and UFC 300 only comes around every decade or so. So we're going to milk this one while it's here. But thank you to everyone for sticking around. Next week, we will be back. And next week, we saved the fight announcements. Conor versus Chandler. Dustin versus Islam. Sean versus Paulo Costa. We'll talk about those next week. That gives us something to talk about next week, and we simply did not have time today, as you can tell. So that's on the docket for next week and any other news that comes up. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure to come back